There is a voice in your head that speaks with more confidence than any enemy you ever met. It remembers every failure and painful detail and forgets your small victories in seconds. It calls you lazy when you are exhausted, pathetic when you are afraid, broken when you are simply human. You would never talk to a friend the way this voice talks to you, yet you let it narrate your whole life without question. Carl Jung would call it a piece of your shadow that you mistook for your entire self. Nietzsche would say you have allowed a tired, resentful part of you to sit on the throne and call itself truth. You are not born hating yourself. You were taught slowly to see yourself through the eyes of disappointment. In this video, we will use Jung and Nietzsche to expose how that inner verdict was built, and then we will start rewriting it before it writes the rest of your life. Part 1. The Psychology of Self-Hate. Carl Jung would say the first time you felt like the problem was not a thought, it was an atmosphere. A room gone cold when you entered, a parent's face tightening, a teacher's eyes rolling, a group of kids laughing a little too long. As a child, you cannot analyze any of this, you can only survive it. So your mind makes a simple trade. It is safer to believe there is something wrong with me than to believe the people I depend on are failing me. If every conflict at home ended with, "Why do you always do this?" your nervous system learned that peace depends on you shrinking. If love came in unpredictable waves, warm one day and distant the next, you started to think that stability is something other people deserve. If school was a slow drip of humiliation, small comments about how you talk, how you look, how you try, you learned that visibility is dangerous. Jung called these early impacts complexes, clusters of memory and emotion that sit below consciousness and fire whenever something similar happens again. You do not walk around thinking, "I have a defectiveness complex." You just feel a familiar sickness in your chest whenever you disappoint someone, see disapproval in a face, or watch something you care about go wrong. The mind then builds a sentence to explain that feeling. I am too much. I am not enough. I ruin everything. You carry that sentence with you into the years everyone calls adulthood. Then life adds fresh proof. You fail an exam not because you were exhausted and studied badly, but because, of course I failed, I always choke when it matters. You lose a friendship not because you grew in different directions, but because, of course they left, I am impossible to love for long. You relapse into the habit you hate, lose another night to scrolling or explicit content or numb distraction, and the conclusion is never, "This pattern is strong." The conclusion is, "I am weak." Nietzsche would say that when your strength has nowhere safe to go outward, it turns inward as cruelty. You become the priest and the sacrifice at the same time, inventing a private religion where the only commandment is that you must suffer for existing. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." Self-hate goes one step further and says, "I was always bad and I will always ruin things." Your brain starts using that conclusion as a shortcut. Anytime there is pain, conflict, rejection, or failure, the mind reaches for the same verdict to make the world feel less random. It is easier to say I am trash than to hold the complexity of I am a decent person who acted like a coward today because I was terrified and tired. Over time, this belief stops feeling like an opinion and starts feeling like the weather. It colors everything, even good moments. When something finally goes right, you do not relax into it. You wait for proof that you do not deserve it. The belief also behaves like a parasite. It uses your behavior to feed itself. When you secretly think you are the problem, you stop trying fully because you expect collapse. When you do not try fully, you get more collapses. Every collapse looks like confirmation. You choose people who treat you like a backup plan because you half believe that is your rank. You stay in rooms and habits that slowly drain you because leaving would require the belief that you can do better. You sabotage chances, miss deadlines, disappear when things become serious, then stand over the wreckage and say, "See, this is who I really am." Your nervous system thinks it is protecting you from the pain of hope. It is less painful to say, "I failed because I am fundamentally broken," than to admit, "I wanted this deeply and reality still hurt me." So you quietly become a lawyer for the prosecution in your own head, gathering evidence that the harshest possible story about you is the true one. This is why simple motivation does not stick. You try to build new habits on top of a foundation that keeps whispering, "None of this matters, you will sabotage it anyway." Until you see that foundation clearly, until you can say, "This sentence about me is a belief, not a fact." Every small mistake will send you back into the same cell. Self-hate is not your nature. It is an old survival pattern that was promoted to identity because no one ever showed you another way to read your own story. Part 2. Philosophical Identity, Shadow, Guilt, and Becoming. If you sat across from Carl Jung and told him how much you hate yourself, he would not be impressed by your honesty. He would ask a different question. Whose voice is that? Jung spent his life trying to show people that they are not just the thin slice of personality they show to the world. That slice, the polite, controlled version of you, he called the persona. Behind it sits the shadow, everything you were not allowed to be. Every impulse that scared your parents, every anger you swallowed, every ambition that felt arrogant, every softness that was called weak. When you push all of that down, it does not disappear. It waits. It leaks out in dreams, in fantasies, and overreactions. When you refuse to see your own shadow, it will find another way to be seen. One of the easiest ways is to turn it into pure self-hate. Instead of admitting, "I am angry, I am envious, I am terrified of being ordinary," you call yourself trash. Instead of saying, "I wanted to hit back, I wanted to scream, I wanted to run," you say, "I am a coward, I am pathetic." The energy of all the things you are not facing piles up and hits you from behind. Jung would tell you that self-hate is often the price you pay for trying to stay too clean in front of others. You build a persona that looks acceptable and send every uncomfortable part of you into exile. Then you wonder why you feel like a stranger in your own skin. Nietzsche goes even further. He looks at self-hate and sees a twisted kind of morality. When you cannot fight the world outside, when you feel too small to confront the people and systems that hurt you, your strength does not vanish. It turns inward. You become your own enemy. You invent a moral story in which you deserve to suffer. Not because this is true, but because it gives you the illusion of control. If all the pain in your life is just punishment for how awful you are, then at least the chaos has a reason. Nietzsche watched people do this with their desires, their bodies, their failures. Instead of saying, "I was wounded and now I am scared," they said, "I am dirty, I am evil, I am worthless." This allowed them to keep the world on a pedestal and put all the ugliness inside themselves. He called this resentment, the habit of biting yourself because you are afraid to bite reality. Self-hate feels like honesty, but often it is just resentment folded inward. It lets you avoid the harder truth that some of what hurt you was not your fault at all. And some of what you are doing now is still your responsibility to change. Jung and Nietzsche are not interested in you staying in that twisted comfort. Jung wants you to turn around and look directly at the parts of you that you sent into the dark. Your anger, your jealousy, your hunger, your pride, your neediness. Not to worship them, not to obey them, but to stop pretending they are not yours. As long as you refuse them, they will continue to sabotage you from below, and you will keep calling it fate or nature. Nietzsche wants you to stop playing the role of the victim in your own head and start treating your life as something you are supposed to shape. When he says become who you are, he is not asking you to stay stuck in your current behavior. He is saying that your deepest self is not the bundle of shame you currently identify with. It is the part of you that is still capable of choosing, still capable of taking your pain and turning it into form. When you say, "I am the problem," you are handing that power away. You're saying, "I am finished. This is the final version of me." Nietzsche would laugh at that. He saw humans as unfinished, dangerous works in progress. The real sin is not being flawed. The real sin is refusing to create anything with those flaws. Self-hate is not deep truth. It is a stale story you keep telling because it feels safer than admitting how powerful your choices still are. Part 3. Rewriting the verdict. If self-hate is an old verdict, then the only way out is to stop living like the trial is over. You will not do that with pretty affirmations. You do it by attacking 3 things that keep the verdict alive: the story, the evidence, and the environment. First, the story. When "I am the problem" shows up, you do not just drown in it. You ask Jung's question: whose voice is this? You trace it back to rooms and faces. A comment at home, a teacher's sarcasm, a breakup where someone called you too much or not enough. You write down 2 or 3 of those moments so your brain stops treating the sentence like some divine announcement. It came from people in specific situations. It is not a law of the universe. Second, the evidence. Right now, your nervous system acts like a biased judge. It saves every failure as proof that you are defective and deletes every small win as an accident. For the next 30 days, you flip that on purpose. When you act in a way that fits the old story, you write it once, plainly, without insults. "I lied about finishing the task. I ghosted someone who cared about me." Then you add one line: "What was I trying not to feel? Fear, shame, boredom, rejection." You are not excusing yourself. You are teaching your brain to see a human reaction, not a monster essence. On the other side, you start collecting even small moves that do not match the verdict. The message you answered instead of hiding. The work block you finished. The night you cut a binge shorter than usual. The honest sentence you said when lying would have been easier. These tiny contradictions are how you feed a new story. Third, the environment. You cannot keep living in a setup that constantly proves your worst story and then blame only your will. If every collapse happens alone, late, with a glowing screen in reach, that is not neutral. It is a rigged casino. You do not negotiate with it, you change it. You move devices out of the places where you break the most. You add friction between you and the habits that make you hate yourself. Not because you are weak, but because you want your strength free for better battles. The goal is simple. Make it slightly easier to behave like someone in training and slightly harder to behave like someone who has already given up. You will still forget to write, break your own rules, fall straight back into old behavior and wake up with the verdict screaming in your head again. That moment is the real work. Instead of saying, "Of course, this is who I am," you borrow one short line. "I am not finished." Then you do one small corrective act. Clean what you wrecked. Send one message you are avoiding. Show up to one block of work. Cut the binge short instead of letting it run. You are giving your nervous system fresh evidence that the old sentence is no longer accurate. The voice that says you are the problem will not disappear. But with enough of these quiet decisions, it stops sounding like a judge and starts sounding like what it always was. A relic from a time when you did not know you were allowed to become someone else. Outro, a new story about you. If you are still here, it means you did not click away when the video started to sound uncomfortably familiar. That already tells you something your old story never includes. The verdict in your head says you never finish anything. You always run, you always sabotage. Yet you stayed. Jung would say a different part of you is trying to step out of the shadow. Nietzsche would say there is still enough strength left in you to want more than a life spent on your knees in front of an old sentence. Nothing changes just because you watched a video. Your nervous system does not care about insight. It cares about what you do the next time the voice says, "You are the problem." In that moment, you have a choice that your story never mentions. You can act as if the verdict is final, or you can act as if you are not finished. One path is familiar. You shrink, you hide, you collect more proof that you are exactly as broken as you say. The other path is quieter and harder. You hold the shame in your chest and still do one small thing that does not fit the story. You speak honestly once. You show up once. You cut one self-destructive ritual short. You will not feel like a new person. You will feel like an imposter pretending to be someone slightly braver. That is fine. Every person who ever became anything started as an imposter in the life they wanted. The question after this video is not, do I deserve to exist or am I secretly special? The question is brutally simple. Will I keep serving the old verdict or will I spend the next months giving my future self better evidence to work with? You are not your worst sentence. You are the one who writes the next one.